Howdy and welcome. I'm Mike with Board Games for One. I'm your board gaming every dude, and today I'm here to help you out with getting started on your solo board gaming journey. Maybe you're a veteran and you've been playing board games a long time and you're just wanting to try out some solo gaming to see why it's growing and why people do it to begin with, or maybe you are brand new. Either way, we're going to go through 5 tips that are going to help you pick a good game as fast as possible. So a couple weeks ago, I was playing games with the boys from the Hidden Gems podcast. I'm going to put them in the description below. By all means, check them out. They're awesome. But Chris, who is one of the speakers on the podcast there, I believe he hosts it. He asked me a question. He was like, so what solo board game should I start with? And I didn't really know how to answer that because that's kind of a huge question. And he's in a library of hundreds of games that he owns. And he said that he had tried a game out on his own, Pulp Detective, and no digs on the game. I love the game. The art's beautiful. It's a solo only game. But he said he tried it and he just did not enjoy the experience. And I can see why. I have that game in my collection. I love it. Wouldn't recommend it for starters. But it got me thinking, how does someone get started in solo board gaming? So here's some of the things that I've learned. Tip number 1, don't go straight to one player only games. So if you go into a board game store and you ask them about solo games, if it's like my experience, they will take you to a solo section where they have one player only games. And there are some fantastic solo only games. Under Falling Skies, Hostage Negotiator, people love Final Girl. So many others that you'll see featured even on my channel. They're great. However, I'm about to get a bunch of fruit thrown at me. Don't start with those, okay? Friday's another one. Don't start with those games for solo only because, well, there's just not as much to choose from. So it is nice that they're designed for solo only so they can be a little easier and quicker to learn, but the theme in the game just might not appeal to you. So I don't suggest starting with them. I find solo only games tend to be smaller unless it's Finding Nemo. And because they're smaller, they're great to take with you on vacation and traveling, things like that. They're fun to play at home as well for a quick game in and out, but not as your first game. Next, know your library. Do you even have one? So are you a brand new gamer? If so, I've got some tips for you. Or are you a veteran? If you're a veteran and you've got a big library, this whole thing gets settled pretty fast. Which game do you like the most? What is your favorite? What game, when you look at it, excites you, makes you think, I want to take it out? Does it have a one-player option? If it doesn't, go to the next one. You got to have a game with a one-player option somewhere in there, unless they're mostly games that are quite a bit older, at least as far as this hobby is concerned. But pick that game and play that solo. Very, very simple if you have a large library. What if you don't, or your library doesn't have any one-player options, or you just aren't very excited about any of the games in your collection? Well, that's where it comes to knowing your budget, because you're going to be buying a new game. So if you're brand new to this, decide, am I wanting to spend $15, or am I willing to go up to $60? You can go higher than that. You can go straight for the $100 mark. But if you're brand new and you're unsure about board games, I wouldn't recommend that. If you're a veteran, set it for whatever you want. But realistically, you're going to be looking between $15 and $60 for your first game. Next thing that can help out a lot is joining a solo community group. There are several. There's one on Facebook called Board Games for One, actually BG41 is what it is. It's not affiliated with me in any way, but you can ask a question there, or you can just browse through, which is more what I would recommend doing, looking at the different games that people feature. And you'll notice most of the games featured are multiplayer games with a single player mode. And then sometimes solo only games get featured because they're fantastic, but again, doesn't mean that you start with them. The most important suggestion comes back to my teaching. One of the hardest things to do for a lot of teachers is to get students to read. How do you get a student to read? Well, you help them to pick things that they enjoy. If it's a comic book, great. If it's fiction and a big giant book, if it's reading about ancient history, if it's sports magazines, if it's just reading online articles, whatever it's reading, help them find what they actually enjoy and they will read. Well, it's going to be similar. So which game should you pick? Well, pick the game that interests you that has a one-player option. And there are so many. There are so many. There are so many. You can go onto the Board Game Nexus. You can check that website. If you go to the filters on the left, you can click the solo or one-player games. I don't know if it's solo board games or one-player games. And just browse. Just browse. Find the one that interests you, that falls within your budget, and try that game out. Here's the caveat. Learning to play board games by yourself is a little more challenging. So you need to be ready for that. Be realistic. When you're playing with a group, you may be able to have someone else be your teacher, and you may be accustomed to that. If you're like me, you're not accustomed to that because you didn't have a game group, so no big deal. But if you're accustomed to that, you're going to have a little bit of a switch here where you are going to have to teach yourself. There are so many videos out there. Google any game's name, and there's a how-to video. If there is not, put it in the comments below, and we'll have to figure out how to make one, okay? Because I just don't think it exists. It's got to be out there. So, find your instructions, read your instruction booklet, and don't put too much pressure on yourself. If you get something like Wingspan for your very first game, which I do recommend, but you are going a little deeper into the water with that one, with learning an Automa, an actual solo AI opponent, but you can enjoy the process if you give yourself some time. If you're like, you know what, I don't actually have to learn this in one day. I can take 15 minutes, learn that, 15 minutes, learn that, and now I'm just going to lay the game out. I'm going to play it. I'm going to make all kinds of mistakes. This is what's great about solo gaming. Let yourself make mistakes while you learn. That's how you learn the game. I'm terrible at board games. If I play in a group, if I'm playing a Euro, I will be last. I might not be last. I might be next to last, but I'm probably going to be last because I'm so used to well, I might just not be good at games, but I'm so used to experimenting and being like, I know that this is probably the most optimal, but that is more interesting. So that's what I want to try. And I'm so used to doing that that I find all the ways that you're not really optimally supposed to play the game. And I do that if I play with other people, so I'm terrible. But when you're solo, it doesn't matter. You're exploring and enjoying the game. And you can play through 3, 4, 5 times. And then you're like, okay, I'm glad I got to explore this, this, and this. This is how to win it, or that's how to win it. Or if it's an excellent game, there might be several different ways that work depending how the game plays out. But I'm not going to keep yammering. There's your 5 tips there. Sum it all up. Pick the one you like. Be careful. I wouldn't recommend starting with a solo-only game. I would come back to that later. Definitely add them to your collection because they're awesome. But don't start with it. That's it. I made this next video just for you. I love you all. See you next time.